Greetings. I am Tom Earl. Welcome to the celebration. We know you could be anywhere. It's the fact that you are here sharing your time and energy with us. We're just stupendously grateful for that. Guess what? You are valued, you are loved, and you are appreciated. As you can see, part 2 is here. Sadiya, back. Although we didn't go anywhere. Back for you.
Hey, good to be back.
Anything you want to say while the camera's still on, or should we just go camera off back into
I'm ready. I'm ready to jump right into round 2.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so I know we bookmarked some questions, but as a segue, I wanted to ask, you have done an in-person podcast episode with me, one of the few, and you've done Zoom episodes with me. What do you think of this new format?
I like this new format. This Zoom, maybe Zoom has come a long way. It's pretty reliable. And I like the not being on camera, but just enough so people can put a face to a voice. And it does take a little bit of the pressure off to not have the camera on and just feel like we're catching up as two friends. So I like it.
Awesome. That's where that was one of my realizations. Preferably, I'd like to be able to like walk around and like stretch while we're talking, but I haven't found a way to have great audio while doing that. But
I want to add that I enjoy listening to it too, because when I listen to your podcasts and they're in the shorter segments, it gives me a little bit more time to give you the feedback about it. And I think that's kind of how I like process it and reflect on it, is by texting you and telling you all about what I liked in that podcast. So the shorter segments mean you might be hearing more from me. So that's, in my head, that's a good thing.
That's awesome. That is the feedback I've been getting. Is like, okay, it's not an hour and a half. I can listen to this. So that's helpful to know, because a lot of the podcasts I listen to are like 3 hours long. So I'm like, long form's the best. So that's helpful to know that, maybe I'm in the minority on that one.
They're both good, but sometimes the really long ones, like usually I listen to podcasts early in the morning when I'm getting ready for work, and it doesn't take me 3 hours to get ready. So I'm not going to revisit it until the next day. And by the next day, I might feel like, maybe I'm in the mood for listening to something else. So it's just, the smaller chunks sometimes can be more manageable, and I can listen to a whole podcast during the time that I'm getting ready.
That makes sense. And then for me, it's really a capacity thing. It's like, for us to spend the next 2.5 hours together and it's just one episode. Like I had found that I was just like constantly stressed about getting the next episode out, and Chi-Chi and Molly were like, dude, where is the next episode? I'm like, I'm trying so hard. I'm trying.
Makes sense.
And I feel like in 2022 was almost all replays. So I feel like I've used up all my replays. So it's like, so this is helpful. Chopping it up into 4 episodes is great. Okay. So you had a question on friendship and gifts from our last one. What did you want to ask?
Okay. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to make this a little bit of a 2-part question. Where do you fall on the love languages? Where does gifts fall for you, if you know?
Yeah, that's a good one. Words of affirmation is definitely my top. Then time would be my second. And then those are like my 2. So then in friendships, because I think it's different than with my my partner. Acts of service is definitely in there, because there's so much to do in building a house together. But gifts with friends, I mean, I guess the only time I'd get a gift from a friend would be my birthday, like if they came to my birthday party.
Okay.
I feel a lot of anxiety around receiving a gift because there's so much like, oh my God, you put so much time into this, and what if I don't like it? Then I'll need to perform that I do like it, but then I really won't end up using it. And so what if I return it? And then you're like, where? Like I had one friend give me something. I was like, I'll never use this. So I returned it. And then they're like, where is it? Where is it? I want to see it. I want to see it. I want to see it. And I know for them, they would be like crushed if they knew I returned it. So I just avoid it. I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. It must be in the basement, you know? So I don't know. This is a really great question, but I think you might have some thoughts. Why don't you? Your thoughts might clarify my thoughts.
No, that's very interesting actually, because I was curious about that too. The act of receiving gifts and ones that maybe you're not that into or you don't like it so much. I totally get how that could be a bit stressful. I kind of want to talk more about that, but I wanted to ask my other question first.
Okay.
When someone gets you a Christmas present, do you feel like you have to get them one back?
Yeah, that would probably feel like oh shit, you know? It depends on what it was. Like I've been getting back into art pretty seriously. So for Christmas, I made a couple people collages because I just wanted to. Like my brother just got married, and I was like picking up things from the wedding. I was like, oh, I'm totally going to use this in a mixed media piece. So like I've had that vision since September. So I finished it, I gave it to them. And for me, it was like fun creating it. And it was functional art, and it'll be on their house. And like, you know, that was really tough for me to not give them, wanting them to perform how they received it. You know, like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And you are such a genius. And this is going to bring us joy for the rest of our years. Like, it's so hard to give a gift like that and not, you know, and not have your ego give the gift. But like for something like that, I don't need it to be reciprocated, but I would feel anxiety. Like if somebody got me a gift and I didn't get them anything, I'd be like, oh my gosh. But if they were like, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. I promise. You know, I'd like try to believe them. And if they lived around here, you know, I might be like, hey, the way I can reciprocate is not a lot of people get to have a home cooked meal. Like, why don't you come over? I'll make us a really nice meal. Or it's a really deep question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, interesting. So actually on this question, we differ. I know a lot of people who feel the need to reciprocate, just as you said. Maybe most people, I don't know, feel that kind of burden. But it is something that I was reflecting on following the holidays, you know, like a month or so ago, that I feel like I take gifts properly because I can accept them with the intention that it was given and not feel indebted to someone or not feel like I have to reciprocate. It's more like, wow, this is so meaningful because it shows me that our relationship is important to you and you thought about this. But if I didn't have any idea that I specifically thought about for this one person, and I couldn't think of anything worth getting for that person, then I don't really feel bad about it. And I think it's kind of like hard for people to accept gifts for some reason. I think they feel like they owe something to the other person. And I know when I give a gift to someone, it's probably because it's something that I think the other person is going to like, or as I mentioned, you know, let's say it was my husband and I got him I saw this really cool Daredevil game randomly, then maybe I'd like get that Daredevil game because I thought about him, as opposed to having this obligation of like, oh, he gave me a Christmas present. Now I have to go and stress out and figure out what to get him. And I mean, a husband, that's a very close relationship, but even in general with other relationships, I think it can be a really good practice to accept gifts wholeheartedly and let yourself enjoy them. Something that I've been thinking about lately.
It's a really deep question. I'm always, to me, like trying to figure out what are the questions underneath the question. So I think one of the questions here is like, what is your level of security in the love you have with people, right? So if we think of like a friendship, what's your level of security in that relationship? And for me, coming from like a childhood of emotional trauma, that there was not a lot of safety, and that there were a lot of tests and games that you didn't realize were tests or games. And one of them could be gifts, like, oh, this person's birthday or the holiday that this person seems important. And they want you to show them that you care based upon the gift you're going to give them, but they won't tell you what the gift is, or maybe they'll tell you. And if you give anything else, even if it's like something very creative and thoughtful, you know, like you're a kid and you do like this hand painted thing, it's like, this is not what I asked for. You got it wrong. And there will be consequences. Or like seeing like people get people gifts, and then the person didn't react the way they wanted to. And then that person failed that test and was like cut off. So I think like growing up in that environment of like it's hard to not feel like in all your relationships you're like one failed test away from losing that person. So I think there's that in a lot of my relationships in life, I'm trying to be self-aware of like not putting my interactions through that lens. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And that definitely got deep.
Well, it's a deep question. You know what I mean? Where do your feelings come from about things that happen in your relationships? For example, when you give or receive a gift, and you know, why do you feel that way, and what's the reason, and how much of it is a reality versus something that is a mental movie that you're making, and why are you making that specific mental movie?
If I'm relating it back to gifts, I think when you're giving the gift, the exciting part is thinking that you found something that the other person will really like. And so I can understand it is disappointing if the other person doesn't like it. But I feel like a lot of the joy comes from thinking of them and knowing you're waiting to give them that gift and you're excited about it because you really care about that person. So I place the importance on that part of it. And maybe I'm wrong, but I also project that the other way around. So when someone is giving me a gift, I'm thinking, especially for certain friends I know, like gifts is really high on their love language. They really took time, like thought about this. They were thinking about me. They love me. They care about me. And the joy is coming from the connection that we have. And then, you know, opening the present is just the very last cherry on top. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of thinking about it in terms of the love languages now. So maybe my confidence in my relationships comes from those other things like quality time spent together, and words of affirmation and all the other ways that you can show love to someone. Yeah. And I did struggle for a long time with like that type of anxiety that you were describing about getting a gift and what if it's not something that you really want. And as I've grown, I agree with you. If you're not going to use it, then that's okay. Let it go, return it, give it to someone else, and it's fine. It doesn't mean that the intention behind it was any less real. And whatever grace I extend to myself in terms of that, I think about it for the other person. If I get someone a gift that actually really doesn't suit them, that's okay. I'm focusing on our relationship and our intentions with each other.
That's awesome. I think a big part of it too becomes just, I was watching, so this is kind of like a tangent within tangent. One of the things now that Adora and I just seem to not really have much time together where we can watch TV together. So we have these shows that we typically only can watch together. And I don't know, like in a given week, maybe we'll get a half hour to watch something together. Maybe we won't at all. So then like one of the ones is Queer Eye that we watched that together. So we've just been putting off like the last 2 seasons because we're going to watch this together. So if I was finally like, I'm claiming this back. We're never going to watch it together. So I got the green light. And so I was watching it, and is Karamo, is that the mental health person's name? Do you watch the show?
I've seen it. I don't remember the name.
Okay, let's just give it the old. Yep, Karamo. So he was saying to somebody, they're like, "Don't you do things like that sometimes?" And he was like, "I don't, because I love myself, and I would never do that because those are things people do when they don't love themselves." And I was like, "Oh man, that's such a good way to phrase it." And I think holding on to friendships or relationships where the person responds in even if it's unintentional, even if it's literally the best they can do. So like, I don't mean this with anger or judgment, but when the person is responding in a very unhealthy way, like they give you a gift and you react wrong or you don't reciprocate. So they're like secretly mad at you or openly mad at you. And it's like, if you love yourself, you let those people go, or you say something, you invite them to do better, and then you let them go. And I think that's a part of like growing into loving with yourself is like, we have the ability to choose who we let into our inner circle and who we choose to share our love with and our time with and all of those things. And if somebody's not able to give gifts or any of those things in a healthy way, it's like, you got to bless and release those people. You only have enough room in your life for so much. And that's kind of like one of the things I think as an adult that I've tried to focus on is like, okay, I think it's time to stop pouring energy into this relationship.
Yeah. That's a hard one. And that's one that I'm constantly trying to improve upon. And I agree, like friendships are so valuable and the right friendships are priceless. And it can be hard. I think when it comes to not pouring into a relationship anymore, I definitely get a lot of feelings of guilt around that. And even recently, even within the past month or so, I've had a few coworkers move on to different jobs. And these were people that I like sometimes occasionally hang out with, but now they live in a different city, or I just don't get to keep that relationship on the basis of proximity. And I have been thinking to myself, should I make an effort? Should I reach out to this person? Is it worth it? And I haven't, because I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe these were just more acquaintances rather than friendships, and how much effort do I want to make to maintain the friendship? And I, have other things that are going to take up my time, things that I want to focus on, hobbies, other close family and friend relationships. And I struggle with that a little bit because I feel guilty that I'm like actively choosing not to make the effort, even though I know that's what is right for me and that's what I want right now. But there's a part of me that's thinking, I don't know, is the other person okay with this? Do they care? Am I being a bad person by not making the effort?
I'm pondering on this one.
No, me too. That's a tough one for me.
I think we're starting to like get into different categories here, because I think there's people who would want your time and then realizing that you need to stop giving them it. Right. And so then when you realize that, do you have the conversation with them that's like, I'm going to stop giving you time because of this, or unless this? It's like thought pattern number one. Or do you just slowly stop pouring in the energy, and the less you reciprocate, the less the person's going to pour in, and then eventually y'all will drift apart? Like, so is it a relationship that you want to stay in, but unless these things change, you can't? Well, then you should talk about it. But if it's just like, I need to pause. Now, I think for the most part, ghosting's not a healthy thing, but sometimes when you've had those conversations and you've done those things and it's not going to change, that you just need to, I don't think you need to do well, then I'm not talking to you. I think it's just a stop pouring in the energy. And especially if it's someone who's a taker, not a giver, when you stop giving, they will find someone else who will give, right? It doesn't have to be dramatic. If you just stop checking in on them when they ask you to solve their problems, ask them a question rather than solve their problems. So that's like this category over here. Then I think you have the category of like, these are people I genuinely care about. I'd love to be with them more, but because of time, place, circumstance, I can't. I have found a way to manage that is, one, like at the new year, just send every single person you can to a happy new year. I'm thinking of you. You know, it's just like a nice way to once a year try to keep track of as many people's birthdays as you can, to send a birthday video to. If you have a birthday party that you invite lots of people. So I think these kind of like little once a year touch points. But then I myself have been getting really into telling folks like, hey, I think that long form voice memos are a great way to stay in touch. So I've started sending people like 10, 15-minute, I use Loom, like, hey, here's a rambling, what's going on in my life. Boom, send. And it's like, whether you listen to this now or in the next 60 days, here's where I'm at. And then they can respond. And I found that can sometimes evolve into like phone calls. And I think phone calls are a great way to stay in touch with people. So I think it's kind of finding ways to stay in touch that are sometimes unconventional.
I love these ideas, and I really need to be writing these down because, but why? I don't know why, but long form voice messages or voice messages in general it feels so different than leaving a voicemail because like when you describe it, it's like, isn't that just what we used to do when people actually called each other and you left a voicemail? But it somehow feels like something completely different. It more feels like getting a letter from someone rather than a voice message. I don't know. That's really cool. I love that idea.
Well, I think it's too like intention. And I love the letter part. Like with a voice message, it's usually something that I want you to respond to pretty quickly, like there's a timeline, and preferably by like calling me back or something like that. But I usually try to set the stage for people. I'll be like, hey, this is the first one of them you're receiving from me. This is the way I stay in touch with people. There's no expectation that you listen to this in a timely manner. No expectation that you respond in a timely manner. No expectation you respond in the way I reached out to you. This is just, for me, this is almost like we're hanging out. So give it a shot. Or if you're like, this is weird. And then also they can listen to it on 2x speed if they want, because I send it by Loom. They can listen to it while they're going for a walk. They can listen to, so it's like there's a lot of functionality to it that I think makes it accessible.
And you could listen to it over and over, like my voice message. If you're just like, hey, Sadiya, you're awesome, I'm just going to rewind that 5-second clip over and over and use it as my motivation during the day.
Create some music with your harp to it, record it.
Yes. Oh, brilliant.
So, but I think a lot of it is just you just gotta carve out the space to even give yourself the capacity to think these things through and then to do it. And for the most part, I think most of us either pour all of that creativity and time and space either into our work lives or into our kids. And then everything else is kind of like when you get a chance, and you're never going to get a chance. So it just doesn't happen.
Great. Yeah, that is so true. With friendships too, this has more to do with like having a limited capacity to handle a whole bunch of friends. I remember one girl I used to work with like 10 years ago. She was a little older than me at the time. So she was probably like in her mid 30s where I'm at now. And I actually appreciated her because she would outright say like no new friends, but before Drake said it, no new friends. She would not give anyone her number. She'd be like, don't call me after work. I'm not trying to make any new friends. Even though when we'd work together, it would be really fun, cool, like chatty, laughing. But then she would say, no, like I cannot handle any more people wanting to hang out with me outside of work. And I don't know, I kind of really get it actually. And it was pretty cool that she was so direct about it.
That's awesome. That is really awesome.
I appreciated it.
It's really tough to not be a people pleaser. It's really tough, to just set expectations fully is tough, especially if we don't really even know what we ourselves want. That's tough. What is like your process for self-awareness and reflection and self-honesty, and what's your process? Do you have one? Where are you carving out space for that?
The best one is probably journaling. And that is something that when I do that, it really something I know I've heard people say this. I'm pretty sure people on your podcast have said this, but something about writing out your thoughts really clarifies them, and you might not even know exactly how you're feeling until you have that pen to paper. I don't know what it is, but there is some magic in that. So anytime I'm really feeling overwhelmed or there's something I need to process, writing it out is super helpful. I definitely don't do it regularly. And it probably would be beneficial to incorporate a little bit more into my life. I can't think of anything else at the moment about how do I stay self-aware. The best one I can think of is journaling, but I don't know how I actually stay self-aware since I only journal every few months. What about you? What's your process for it?
Do you mind if I ask a couple follow-up questions and then I'm happy to share? I would imagine that it's really anytime you get space to just think. Because you like, even today before we started, and I won't divulge the specifics, but you'd already thought through the interaction. You already talked to two people about it. You were able to say, when I was like, how are you? Here's where I'm at. So clearly in your day, you had some sort of process that you went through. Because a lot of people are like, I'm good. And they're not even quite aware that like you're not, and here's why. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does remind me of something else as well, which is there are those occasions when I might feel a little anxiety or upset about something, or I'll feel like I'm having a really good day and suddenly I feel like I'm not having a very good day, and I don't know what happened, and I don't know why my mood has suddenly changed. And I will say I have improved in the past few years trying to pinpoint those emotions, the origin of those emotions, because I used to be someone who I just did not process anger very well and not know what anger was. Not be able to identify it, not be able to identify what caused it. And then like it would be brewing, and then a couple weeks later I would just blow up at someone, like whoever I'm mad at, once I finally figured out that I was mad. And that's not very helpful for anyone, I don't think. And so now when I feel like my day has taken a turn and I'm just not feeling my normal disposition, which is like pretty positive, I pause and I recount the events that have happened and try and think, what was it that like tilted me? And I have found that helpful, because I usually can find the thing. And it could be something so small. It could be the way somebody said something to me. It could be a thought that I had about a past action that I've taken, one of my regrets that just constantly plays in my mind, that mental tape of something that I regret doing, and maybe something popped up for me, and pausing and taking the time to like rewind and pinpoint what it was has definitely helped me in identifying my emotions, figuring out, how to move forward, because at least now I know what was it that changed my mood.
And are you doing that like while you're driving, while you're walking the dog, while you're like doing stuff around the house, while you're...
Yes, I'm doing it anywhere and everywhere. If it's at work, I'm doing it between my work tasks. I'm just taking that moment to reflect. I don't think it takes too long, actually, usually.
That's awesome.
And once I find it, then that probably will be a day that I can go home and journal and write about it. And I definitely think that helps me process better. So yes, thank you. Your follow-up question did remind me of some methods that I have.
Yeah, it sounds like because you're a very curious person and you're very inquisitive and you're great at asking questions, and you have the courage to put yourself in places that are new and maybe scary to get the answers. And it sounds like you apply that skill to your own life, and that you've turned it into a skill that you've practiced so many times that you can almost do it while multitasking.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds about right.
I spent so much time with people who are like, I don't know why I'm making money in my business, but I am, and having to be like, okay, there's something you're doing that you think is normal, that is unique, that your average person cannot do. So like what you just described, like you have cultivated the skill of introspection and like parsing through and being like, what's that? Oh, where did that come from? Oh, okay. For a lot of folks, it's like, I think a lot of folks mask a lot of this with relentless positivity, where it's just like, you're like, oh, something's wrong. It's like, then be positive, mantra, be positive. It's everything's okay. Everything works, and it's like, and you can eventually like self-soothe to where you kind of like that anxiety or whatever goes away. But instead you're like, let me get curious, because this came from somewhere. And I think it's dope because you don't turn it into an identity. And a lot of times that can happen where it's like, oh, I feel this again. Oh, why does this feeling always follow me? And it's never going to not. This is sometimes what I can do. It's like, oh, it's just always here. And from what it sounds like, you don't turn it into an identity. You're like, oh, this came from somewhere. If I trace it back, I bet I can figure this out.
I see that. That is so affirming. Yeah.
When you answered the gift question, I've been working to name, when I hear people say this, to name like it really is just, all of this is just like an indicator that, and I'm sure you have your tough days, so I'm not minimizing, but like you're a very emotionally and mentally healthy person. And I think that all of this speaks to that.
I really value happiness. And so maybe that comes into play because happiness and transparency and honesty, all of those very idealistic traits, I guess these are things that I really value. And so I never want to be like secretly contending with alternative motives or having those emotions suppressed, even though I'm sure I do like suppress things, but definitely I feel better actively working to uncover the emotions, work through them, rather than let them be there and kind of diminish my disposition. So I do value that.
Well, why don't we go ahead and pause here, and we'll start the next episode. I will share, I'll reciprocate what's my process for self-reflection. And I want to talk a little bit more about where you said I really value happiness. I want to talk about that a little bit more. And then we'll bring it over to you. Any questions you have that have come up or that are fresh, we'll jump into that next week on next week's episode. Does that sound good?
I can't wait for that part. Sounds good.
All right. Where can the good folks out there tell you you're awesome, reach out to you, all that kind of stuff?
If you want to see me, message me. You can find me on Instagram at Sadiya Sassine.
For me, if you want to be a part of our awkward, courageous, weird, fun, who knows, community of storytellers, tomearl.me/DCM invite. Sadiya, another awesome one. Looking forward to jumping in next week. I appreciate you so much. And to all of those who are listening, as always, we're wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.